We have been operating in the contact center space for the last 40 years. We've been focused on the contact center technology really the last 20 years, working with many, many customers across lots of different verticals and industries and use cases to really help drive success within their customer experience. So this is the area that we operate within, especially when it comes to Google Cloud. We really focus on everything around CCAI within platform and all the services that kind of roll into that. So when you look at what that kind of means, right? The majority of our conversations that we have with customers, and this is going to be kind of driving into this analytics piece today, is really looking at what is that omni-channel solution that they're using today. Many companies today are looking at how can I go from premise to cloud? How can I leverage more digital channels in my conversations? How can I automate more? And those are the types of things that we really build solutions on and help go deploy for customers. And in many times we are leveraging Google Cloud and the services around that to help go make those successful. So when you look at what's driving a lot of these conversations, kind of the pain points that we see as there has been an evolution really within the customer experience. Labor costs have gone up significantly the last several years. You can point to several different variables that have caused that. But at the end of the day, the cost to be able to serve has increased. And some of that's just being able to find the right talent. Some of it's finding the right talent in the right places. But there's also been a drive around being able to service customers in the channel of preference. So many customers have different experiences or different expectations that they're after these days, where they want to be able to have a conversation via SMS, or they do want to be able to self-serve. And many of the technologies that are in place today have limitations, right? And they're trying to figure out how can I be able to drive a better customer experience that makes my customers more loyal and creates brand awareness for them and causes them to come back and truly engage with my business more. And the last piece of that is really around that lack of customer insights, right? So that's what we're really going to focus in on today, which many of the conversations we've had the last year has been customers coming to us saying, I want to understand more of the voice of my customer. I want to understand the conversations they're having, what they're asking for, when, why, are they happy, are they upset? And at the same time, I also want to understand what is my associate saying to them, right? Are they being able to service that customer correctly, efficiently? And how can I get access to this data and be able to leverage it to both influence my overall customer journey, make it more efficient, be able to drive more self-service, deploy things like a virtual agent or a natural language IVR to make it really just more engaging. And so those are the types of things that we see really kind of shifting in the marketplace and where investments are going at the moment. So when we kind of zoom out for the moment, we really look at like, what is the ideal situation, right? Many companies today that we work with are still in what I'd call kind of a siloed environment where they may have a core system that's handling voice and it captures its own set of data, and they're able to analyze certain things like how somebody navigates through an IVR. They're looking at call recordings that come out of that. But really, they have maybe deployed a virtual agent in the voice area, that intelligent virtual agent in the IVR. But things like chat, things like asynchronous messaging, SMS, all of these are really still in their own silo. And so kind of the future state, the ideal state that we're working towards with customers is how can we combine those interactions into a single platform and a single kind of system that can handle this with context, deploy that virtual agent on the front end that creates a very, very consistent experience, capture the data that's coming out of that virtual agent, be able to measure that, be able to analyze it. And as the customer flows through and has access to AI to be able to facilitate and self-serve some of those interactions, I still want to be able to provide all that context to an agent. So as a customer moves all the way through and actually gets to an agent, I want to be able to show them, here's the conversation that I've had with the virtual agent. Here's the things I've already asked for. This customer might already be authenticated. And so let's not start that conversation over, right? I also want to be able to take that whole set of data and be able to save it in my system of record. That might be a CRM or it might be a data lake, but I want to be able to combine all of this together so that I can actually go in and both at a micro level, a single conversation, or at the macro level, look at trends that are happening. I want to be able to identify that kind of information, use that to feed back into my customer journey in an iterative process and be able to optimize things like, let's provide more self-service on the front end. Let's be able to recognize more intents and be able to get the customer to the right person that can help that customer event turn into a successful one. And so some of the tools that we use to execute on that are things like Google CCAI, whether it's Dialogflow or speech to text, or things like CCAI Insights, which we'll dig into today a little bit, around being able to actually analyze those conversations, identify intents and topics and sentiment, and then use that data again to feed back into the model. So when you look at where platform and CCAI sit within this, I think this is a really important call out. And some of you may be aware of this, some of you may not. But at a high level, CCAI has been deployed today in hundreds, thousands of customers, if you will, that are using Dialogflow and the different CCAI services to be able to facilitate, enable, manage customer conversations. Platform is kind of the new addition and extension of this. This is where Nathan's going to spend a couple of minutes just to kind of level set with everybody, where now you're actually able to deploy an entire holistic contact center as a service solution to customers. This is something we've been working with customers on recently, starting to do things like bringing a complete omni-channel solution together, being able to deploy things like the customer interactions coming out of a mobile app, and being able to really start to tap into that AI-driven routing methodology to be able to leverage data that's not typically in the contact center to be able to identify a customer's goal, their objective, and make a very personalized experience before we ever drop them off to an agent to be able to resolve that event. And all of this still leverages the broader Google Cloud system, things like BigQuery, the scalability and resiliency of Google Cloud, even getting into Looker from a visualization standpoint. These all play together natively and they work quite well. So as I jump forward here, I'm going to hand this off to Nathan, who's going to give us about 5 to 7 minutes, kind of show you a little bit of these features that are there. And then I'm going to get into the data piece of this, talk about where we're being able to pull out insights coming from CCAI Insights, and how we can leverage that to be able to take a customer further or really be able to optimize that customer experience. So Nathan, I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to you for a second.
All right, awesome. Great to be here again, guys. I'm going to actually flick my camera off while I demo. I'm going to have my head turned. I want you to be able to see my screen. Yeah, let's go ahead and jump in. If you're on the first seminar, are you able to see my screen, Caleb? Can you just verify that?
Yeah, you're good. Yeah.
Perfect. If you're on the first seminar, we actually just kind of jumped into all the different ways that customers can start interacting with us. We haven't really gone down an omni-channel path and how we can shift channels and all that. But I did kind of do a little bit of a piece on, I've got all these different ways, all starting from my mobile device that I can start an interaction. You start talking about SMS, WhatsApp, web, mobile. Today, I'm just going to be on mobile. This is, again, a quick level set to set the stage for the rest of Caleb's conversation. So with that, here I am over here on my left. We got customer, we've got agent on the right. Let me actually get that off the screen. We've got we've got our customer ready to interact, and I'm just going to go in here and start a really quick support session. I've actually got to get this lower so I can see that. Apologize. Okay, so with our chat loading, you can see we're starting out a conversation with a virtual agent, and I don't really have any real intent. I'll just go in here and say one thing, and I'll ask the bot an intent that it doesn't know how to handle, and we'll see what it comes back with. So we're going to escalate into an agent. Yes, would like to talk to an agent. And we can shift channels if we want here. And here we're asking if they want to keep chatting or call. We're going to stay on call. Really, all I'm trying to do is, have an interaction, this brief interaction with the bot. We're going to see some data come through. We're going to see that get out to our agent here. So here's our chat. We got a really short handle time on that. And you can see here, we have the full conversation here. That's the very generic question I typed in that confused our bot and asked them if they wanted to speak to a live agent. So again, here we start a conversation. We can do all the things within the platform that we know make it really, really great experience from a customer perspective, something like taking a photo and sending it back to the agent. It's extremely simple. But again, I'm doing these kind of short pieces here to get to, all this data. It's happening, right? It's all around us. And, Caleb mentioned during his intro, storing it in your system of record, whether that's a CRM, maybe that's a backend data lake. We'll see all of that available to us here in a second. So this customer's now happy. We'll fast forward a little bit and we'll end that chat. Okay, more data. How's your experience, right? All of this is going to play into, what we can do with this, To show you what that looks like, the easiest thing to do is just look in our CRM. In this environment, we're storing it all to the CRM, and a screen pop happened when that chat originally came in. We created a new case to handle this interaction. Over on my related tab, I can see all of this data. So again, being populated in near real time makes it really useful for the agent, but Caleb wants to get to what all we can then do with that on the back end to, improve the customer experience, figure out where we're lacking, all of those things. So just really brief examples, jumping into the transcript. I've got all of this that can be sent off for processing. I've got my sentiment, my feedback rating. I've got the photo, and again, I can upload this and do really cool things. You can do really cool things with photos these days, and what you might be able to do to process those. Again, we got sentiment scores available to us. Again, all available to the agent, but I think we want to take it a step further than that. Okay, that's my brief demo for today. Caleb, I'm going to hand it back to you to take us on here.
Perfect. Thank you, Nathan. That's great. So I know that we've got a short amount of time today. So if you've got questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'll try and leave a few minutes at the end to make sure that we can address them and we can jump into that piece. We can always follow up. We're happy to do that, of course. So as Nathan was touching on there, typically what we have seen in a legacy contact center environment, all those different data elements that you're looking at, both the conversation transcript or the images that are being shared from an SMS or a chat channel, even being able to capture just the actual transcript and save it into a CRM. This may be coming from multiple different systems, products that are actually that are powering that kind of information. And so it becomes a lot of disparate, without context data that you've got to parse through and be able to figure out, how do I combine this together? How do I actually get value out of this? And so it becomes difficult to measure ultimately, right? So we were highlighting CCAI and all those data elements, especially on the virtual agent side with CCAI platform. But it is really worth noting that CCAI is really designed to work with all the major CCaaS platforms, regardless of kind of like the telephony piece, right? So you're talking about the Ciscos and Genesys and Five9s of the world, right? Like all of this will work together to be able to drive this kind of holistic customer experience. So when we look at CCAI and where we're really driving a lot of data out of these things, the virtual agent level, it's pretty straightforward, right? We can measure and track the types of interactions that are happening where there is a conversation with the actual virtual agent, the things they're trying to do, but even getting into some of those traditional contact center metrics, things like abandonment or how long do they actually interact with the virtual agent, right? At the agent assist level, which we'll definitely highlight in a future webinar, you can start to also be able to get things like you're providing a live transcript to an agent, but are they interacting with the knowledge sources that are being provided to them, right? You can actually take a lot of that data that happens from the live transcript, and you can use something like a summary API to be able to condense that information and save it in the CRM. So it's easier to process that conversation. You can actually capture a lot of metadata that comes from the interaction as well. So as Nathan was showing, interacting from a mobile app, we can actually pull data forward to say, this is the type of phone they were operating from, or this is geolocation data that can actually be provided. And you can start to capture those types of things to be able to drive better insight into what's actually happening with your customer. And then insights, which is where we're going to spend a little bit more time on it, that's where we're kind of going to the next level to say, both from a post-conversation type of analysis, as well as somewhat of a real-time conversation analysis, to be able to understand deeper what's happening in those conversations, whether it was voice with a virtual agent or if it was over chat, SMS. You can take all that data, combine it together, and start to model and trend that. And some of that data you can use from a traditional ability to go back and build self-service, build virtual agents like we talked about, but you can also start to get into it from a quality analysis standpoint to be able to say, were these conversations successful? Do we have certain agents that are having poor sentiment scores with all the customers? Maybe that's something we need to dig into and be able to analyze. And then you also start to establish things like outcomes, right? Based on somebody's journey through the contact center, how they got to an agent or how they got to resolve their event. Was it successful? Is that achieving the outcome that I'm after? Is that cost to serve for that type of interaction really high or really low? And those are all things that we want to be able to establish. And we drive a lot of that data, ideally. All of that is being centralized and normalized in BigQuery so that we can use tools like Looker to be able to drive in and do the analysis. And just to give you a couple of examples, don't worry if this is a little bit smaller, condensed. The goal here is really just to highlight, because you have the ability to go in and analyze a combination of these conversations, you can start to look at it from different filters. Things like, I want to see just interactions that were happened with a human, or I want to see interactions that happened with a virtual agent, right? Am I having a high sentiment score with the humans and a low sentiment score with virtual agents? That's something that's going to be really, really key to understand. We can also start to model the topics of those conversations, right? And be able to start to look at things like, let's compare the handle time for certain conversations and certain topics. And do we want to start to look at how we actually skill the agents in the contact center? Maybe there's certain training that we need to provide for them. Maybe we need to break up our operations so that we have certain calls and topics that are going to level 1, level 2, level 3 type of agents, and be able to really try and optimize how we're serving those customers at the end of the day. The really interesting thing too is you can really start to drill down and get into that conversational layer. So at a very specific individual conversation, you can start to pull forward and say, okay, how long was the actual conversation? When did it happen? What was the sentiment score? You can look down and you can break it down by who said what in that conversation. So what did the agent say? What did the person say, right? And where was the sentiment at each one of those stages and those churns? And if you've got it, if you've trained your model, you can go in and actually start to identify the core or the primary topics that happened for those conversations, all things that are going to help you drive back and plug this kind of information into that overall customer journey, right? So last piece of this, and we get this question a lot, which is really kind of like, okay, all sounds interesting, but now what? Like, what do I go do next, right? And so really we like to start with some level of a hypothesis to say, okay, you think you have an idea of the types of calls that you're getting, why people are calling, how that's coming through. And that's really where we start with that conversation layer. Say, let's analyze those conversations. Let's run it through a tool like CCAI Insights to be able to give us better visibility into what's happening. And a lot of that's being based off the idea that many companies today don't want to go and make changes like hypothetically or just based on an idea. They're really trying to make a data-driven decision here. The second piece of that is really where we start to look at the complete customer journey, right? You may have an idea of what's happening based on the different types of interactions that you have, but really start to map that out based on data to be able to say, okay, we understand the flow of how customers are getting to resolve their event. And we've seen this before with customers where very basic tasks, things that should be a very low cost to serve interaction, we're actually making it to one of the most advanced agents in the contact center. So how can we cut that off? And maybe it's whether it's proactive communications or different digital channels, we can actually serve that customer faster, better, and make them happy. And then phase 3 and phase 4 is really where you start to go and take this information that you have, understand the journey, and be able to really start to deploy new solutions so that you can actually make it successful. And I'll continue to say, like, this is truly designed to be an iterative process. It's never going to be a one-time, let's go deploy everything. It's going to be wildly successful and solve all my customer problems. This is really designed to start with something, be able to make incremental enhancements, measure it, be able to show ROI against it of how you can reduce that cost to serve, improve customer loyalty, improve customer satisfaction over time.